Hello again, welcome back to College Algebra. This time we're looking at section 2.2. This one's all about circles. We're going to be looking at the center radius form of a circle, and we'll learn how to graph a circle and how to look at a graph and determine the equation of the circle. And we'll also talk about general form, and we'll learn how to tell whether an equation is going to graph a circle or a point or nothing at all. Here we go. Now I know you know what a circle is, but let's get a definition. A circle is the set of all points in a plane that lie a given distance from a given point. The given distance is the radius of the circle, and the given point is the center. A circle with a center of h, k and a radius of r will have this equation: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Of course, we would have numbers where we see the h and the k and the r. This is the center radius form of the equation because we can see the center and the radius when we look at the equation. Now, if the center is at 0, 0, then the equation will look like this: x squared plus y squared equals r squared. Because if h were 0, then x minus h squared would just be x squared. Now here's example 1, which I have modified just a little bit from the way the book had it. It says, write the center radius form of the equation of a circle with center at -2, 1 and radius 5. Okay, so we know now that h is -2 and k is 1 and r is 5. Okay, so here is the center radius form of the equation, and we'll put the h and the k and the r where they belong. And we'll end up with x minus -2 squared plus y minus 1 squared equals 5 squared. And when we clean that up a little bit, minus negative will be plus, and on the end here, 5 squared will be 25. Here is the rest of example 1. It says, find the center radius form of the equation of a circle with center at 0, 0 and radius equal to 9. Well, if h and k are both 0, then there won't be anything for us to put in our binomial. Again, here's the center radius equation, and the h and the k are both 0, so we're just going to end up with x squared plus y squared equals 9 squared, which is 81. Now let's practice graphing a couple of circles. We've got x plus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 36. So we ought to be able to look at this equation and pull out the h and the k and the r. The center will be -3, 4, and r will be 6. Remember, what we've got here is x minus h. So even though we see x plus 3, we know that the formula requires us to have x minus h. So if this has got to be thought of as minus, then this has got to be thought of as -3. And then this is y minus k, so k is 4. And then the right side is r squared. So if r squared is 36, then r is 6. Let's graph. I've put the center at -3, 4, and now if the radius is 6, I should go 6 steps to the right, 6 steps up, 6 steps to the left, and 6 down to get the top, bottom, left, and right side of our circle. Up 6, left 6, right 6, down 6. And now let's connect the dots with a circle, and I'll do my best to make it round, but it won't come out perfect. And there we go. That's about as good as I can do freehand, but that's how you draw a circle. First find the center, then put a point for top, bottom, left, and right, and then use that as a guide to draw your circle around. Now we'll graph x squared plus y squared equals 9. Remember, the right side is r squared, so if r squared is 9, then r is going to be 3. And since we don't see an h and a k here, we know that h and k are 0 and 0. r is 3. And now let's draw our coordinate system. I've got my center at 0, 0, and now I'm going to put a dot at 3 steps to the right, up, down, and left. And connect them with a circle, and there we go. As always, the next two are for you to practice on your own. They're similar to the last example we did together, so I hope you'll pause the video and try this one by yourself, then we'll go through it together. Okay, here we go. Find the center radius form of the equation of a circle with center at 6, -2 and radius 7. So h is 6, k is -2, r is 7. And that means we're going to have x minus 6 squared plus y minus -2 squared equals 7 squared. The minus negative will become plus, and 7 squared is 49. So this is the final form of our equation. And now let's try graphing this one. We have x plus 2 squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 16. So we need to pull out the h and the k. Remember, the formula says x minus h and y minus k. So whatever signs you see here are the opposite sign from the actual sign of h and k. So our center is going to be at -2, 5. And this side is r squared, so r is 4. And so now let's place a dot at -2, 5 for our center. And then from there we'll go up 4, left 4, and so on. There are the points that make the framework of our circle, and now we'll connect these with a circle. That's it. Here are two more problems that are pretty simple ones, and you can try these on your own and then go through them with me on the video. Here we go. This one says find the center radius form of the equation of a circle with center at 0, 0 and radius 10. Well, it really couldn't be easier if you know the center radius form. You know that x minus h squared is going to end up just being x squared, and y minus k squared is going to end up just being y squared. And then the right side needs to be r squared, so 10 squared is 100. And we'll have x squared plus y squared equals 100. And now let's try to graph x squared plus y squared equals 36. We know that this will have center at 0, 0. And the right side is r squared, so since the right side is 36, our radius is 6. Now let's put a dot at the center, and then we'll go from there 6 up, 6 right, 6 down, 6 left, and put our dots that make the framework of our circle. And now we'll just connect them with a circle shape. Now we need to look at the general form of the circle. In general form, basically the binomials have been multiplied out. So we'll have an x squared and a y squared, and an x term and a y term and a constant, and then the right side will be 0. This is called general form. To get from center radius form to general form, all you need to do is FOIL out the squared binomials and move the constant from the right side over to the left so that the right side is 0. Let's try one together. This time we want to find the equation of a circle in center radius form and then general form. So let's look at the diagram they've given us, and we can see that the center is at -1, -2. And we can also count and see that the radius is 1, 2, 3. Okay, so now let's put this in center radius form. It's going to be x minus h squared. So x minus -1 squared makes x plus +1 squared, plus y minus k squared. So y minus -2 makes y plus 2, and then that's going to equal 3 squared, which is 9. And let's multiply out this binomial. You know, you can write it down times itself, but you need to not forget the middle term. There's a shortcut for getting the middle term. So what we're going to do is go first times first is x squared, and then for the middle term, we know that outer and inner will both be 1x, so together they're going to make 2x. And the shortcut is multiply this times that and then add it to itself. And you get your middle term, and then last times last is 1. And for this one, y times y is y squared. Outer and inner are both 2y. Together they make 4y, and last times last is 4. And then on the right side, we have 9, so let's bring that over to the left. So we have minus 9 equals 0. Now we will combine our constants. We'll have 1 plus 4 minus 9. That's going to be 5 minus 9, which is negative 4. So the final form of the equation is x squared plus y squared plus 2x plus 4y minus 4 equals 0. Here's a practice one that you can do by yourself before we go through it together. And if you've had a chance to do that, now let's go through it together. So this one says find the equation of a circle in center radius form and then general form. So the center is going to be at 3 comma negative 3, and the radius is going to be 3. So now this is our h and this is our k. And so let's put our equation, our center radius equation, as x minus h squared, which will be x minus 3 squared, plus y minus k squared, which will be y minus negative 3 squared, so y plus 3 squared. And that equals 3 squared, which is 9. Now we need to multiply out both of these binomials. Remember, your middle term is going to be twice as much as the product of these two. So first times first is x squared. Outer and inner are both minus 3x. So minus 3x plus minus 3x is going to be minus 6x. Last times last is going to be plus 9. Here, y plus 3 squared, y times y is going to be y squared. The middle term will be 3y plus 3y, so that's 6y. And last times last is 9. And then I'm going to bring this 9 on the right side over to the left side so I can have 0 on the right side. Now let's combine our constants. We have a positive 9 here and a positive 9 here and a minus 9 here. So the positive 9 and the minus 9 cancel each other out, and our constant will end up being positive 9. So let's write x squared plus y squared minus 6y plus 6y plus 9 equals 0. Now we've talked about how to go from center radius form to general form, but what if you're given an equation in general form? How can you know how to graph that equation? Well, it's possible for an equation in general form to have coefficients of x and y and to have a constant f that might cause your graph to not even make a circle. So we need to be able to identify whether our graph is going to be a circle or a point or not a graph at all. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to complete the squares. If you take a general form equation and you attempt to put it in center radius form, if your right side number comes up positive, you're going to have a circle whose radius is square root of that number. If your right side number comes up 0, your graph is just going to graph a single point at h comma k. In other words, basically, you're getting a circle, but it has a radius of 0, so it's so small it just makes a point. And if your right side comes up negative, then that graph won't exist at all. It won't graph anything. Now let's try one together and see how we do. This is example 3. It says decide whether this equation has a circle as its graph. If it does, give the center and radius. If it does not, describe the graph. So what we'll need to do is complete the squares on the x and the y. Now remember, when we complete the square, it requires us to add something to both sides. So what I'll want to do is copy this over and leave a space where I can add something to the x terms and something to the y terms. And I'm going to take this 18 and move it to the right so it's out of the way. Okay, now to complete the square, what we're trying to do is force a trinomial here that can be factored into a squared binomial. So the way to figure out what we need here is to take half of this term and square it, and that's going to give us 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides. And then I'll do the same thing here. Take half of 10 and square it. And half of 10 is 5, and then 5 squared is 25. So I'll add 25 to both sides. Now let's factor the left side. Remember how it factors? We did this before in section 1.4. The square root of x squared, and then this sign, and then the square root of 9. So x minus 3 all squared plus, this one's going to be y plus 5 all squared. And then on the right side, that's going to equal negative 18 plus 9 plus 25. So that's going to add up to 16. Now, think about the center radius formula. And so our h will be 3, and our k will be negative 5, and r squared is 16. Now, since that right side came up positive, it means the graph is a circle, and its center is going to be at 3, negative 5, and its radius is going to be 4. Okay, now here's one for you to practice with, so pause the video and try it by yourself, and then we'll go through it quickly together. Okay, here we go. So I know I need to write this down with the x's grouped together and the y's grouped together and the constant moved to the right side. And now to complete the square on the x's, I take half of 6, I square it, half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9, I add 9 to both sides. And then do the same thing for y. Half of 8 is 4, 4 squared is 16, so add 16 to both sides. Now we can factor both trinomials. The first one becomes x plus 3 squared. The second one becomes y plus 4 squared. The right side adds up to 16. So we do have a positive number here. And that means we're going to get a circle as our graph. And the center of that circle will be at negative 3, negative 4. And the radius will be 4. Okay, now let's look at example 4 together. This time our equation is 2x squared plus 2y squared minus 6x plus 10y equals 1. We want to decide if the graph of this equation would be a circle or not. And if it is a circle, we want to find its center and radius. If it's not, we want to tell what it would be. Okay, well, we know that we have to complete the square on the x's and the y's, but our trick of finding the term to add to both sides, where we take half of the middle term and square it, that trick only works when we've got ones here. So I don't know if you'll remember, but back in section 1.4, when we talked about completing the square, we learned how to divide away the leading coefficient. And so we'll have to do that here. Let's go ahead and recopy the problem. We'll rearrange the terms and leave a space for the terms that we're going to add to both sides. So I've got 2x squared minus 6x and then my space, and 2y squared and plus 10y and then a space, and of course our constant is over here on the right. And now before I complete the square, I need to divide away this coefficient. So let's divide through by 2. Remember, you have to divide everything on both sides by 2. That's going to create a fraction over here. That's going to give us x squared minus 3x plus our space, and y squared plus 5y plus our space equals 1/2. Okay, now to find this term, we'll have to take half of this and square it. Of course, this is an odd number, so when we do half, it's going to make a fraction. So half of 3 is 3/2, and we want to square that, and that's going to make 9/4. So we're going to add 9/4 to both sides. Now half of 5 is 5/2, and we're going to square that, and that's going to make 25/4, and we'll add that to both sides. Okay, now we can factor the left. We know it factors into x minus this square root, and that binomial is squared. And then we'll factor this one, and we know it factors into y plus this square root, and that binomial will be squared. And on the right side, we're going to add these two fractions together. And on the right here, we're going to add these fractions. Of course, 1/2 is 2/4. 2/4 plus 9/4 plus 25/4 all adds up to 36/4. And 36/4 is going to simplify to 9. So this is the final form we end up with. Now since 9 is positive, we are going to get a circle as our graph. And the center of our circle will be at 3/2, comma, -5/2. And the radius will be 3. Now here's another one where you're going to encounter fractions, and this is very similar to the last one we did, so if you'd like to pause the video and try this one by yourself, I recommend that. And now if you've had a chance to do that, I'll go through this one with you. So we've got 4x squared plus 4y squared plus 4x minus 16y minus 19, and we want to see if this is going to graph a circle, and if it does not graph a circle, we need to decide what it would do. So what I'm going to do is complete the square on x and y and see what happens on the right side. Let's go ahead and recopy this, and we'll rearrange the terms so it makes it easy for us to complete the squares. The first thing we have to do is get rid of these 4's, so let's divide everything on both sides by 4. Okay, now that's going to give us x squared plus x, and then here y squared minus 4, and then on the right side 19/4. Okay, completing the square on the x's. Well, the coefficient here is 1, so half of 1 is 1/2, and then when we square that we get 1/4. We'll add 1/4 to both sides, and then for the y's, half of 4 is 2, and if you square 2 you get 4, so let's add 4 to both sides. Now we'll factor. The x's factor into x plus this square root. Of course, this square root is 1/2, and that binomial is squared, and the y's factor into y minus this square root, and that binomial is squared. And on the right, let's see what we get here. 4 is 16/4. So we've got 19 plus 1 is 20, and 20 plus 16 is 36. So we've got 36/4, so the right side is 9 again. And so since the right side is positive, this is going to graph a circle. And the center of that circle will be -1/2, comma, +2. And the radius of that circle will be 3. Now, as our last couple of examples together for this section, I want to make sure that you know what it looks like if you have an equation that would graph a point or an equation that would not have a graph at all. So let's go through this one together and see what happens on this graph. So this is a general form equation, and we'll need to rearrange the terms and complete the squares on the x's and the y's. So just like last time, I'll move the constant to the right side. I'll rearrange the terms so I have the x's together and the y's together. Now, we need to complete the square. So half of 10 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. Let's add 25 to both sides. And here, half of 4 is 2, and 2 squared is 4, and let's add 4 to both sides. Now, factoring the left, we're going to get x plus 5 all squared. And factoring the y's, we're going to get y minus 2 all squared. And on the right side, -33 plus 25 plus 4 is going to add up to -4. Now, it's not possible for a circle to have a negative radius. Now remember, this should be r squared, and since it's negative, the radius of this circle would have to be 2i. That doesn't make sense. We can't have a circle with an imaginary radius. So this graph does not exist. And let's look at one more. So same idea, we have a general equation here. Let's complete the squares on x's and y's. So I'm moving the 18 to the right side. Now half of 6 is 3, and 3 squared is 9. Let's add 9 to both sides. And again, half of 6 is 3, and 3 squared is 9, and let's add 9 to both sides again. And now when we factor this one, we're going to get x minus 3 all squared. And when we factor this one, we're going to get y minus 3 all squared. And on the right side, the constants add up to negative 18 plus 9 is 0. And since this right side is 0, we're basically getting a circle whose radius is 0. But that doesn't really make a circle at all, it makes a point. So the graph is just the point 3, 3.